always hear people say the same thing after a breakup or after a situation happens. You need closure, you need closure. Like, closure is this one big conversation that suddenly makes everything perfect. What you and I need to realize is that closure doesn't always come. Sometimes they disappear, other time the convo you were hoping to have never actually happens. And the uncomfortable truth is that a lot of us spend months, even sometimes years, waiting for closure that was never coming in the first place. I think at some point you start to realize that maybe closure isn't actually what helps you to move on. For me, I used to think closure meant understanding everything, why it ended, why the person changed, why it didn't work out the way I expected it to work. Because when something ends suddenly, your mind starts asking so many questions. And I don't know about you, but I know for sure that my mind does this. You replay the conversation, you think of what you said, if you said anything wrong at all, what you could have done differently. Basically, you just try to make sense of the whole situation. And it's very human to want answers. We want things to feel complete. Everybody has a different view of what closure should be or should look like, but I feel like for most people, they imagine closure as this one big perfect conversation that you have with somebody. You sit down with that person, he talks honestly, he explains everything, what's been on his mind, and at the end, you basically hug it out. But I'm sorry to bust your bubble. In reality, life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes the person pulls away slowly instead. They start replying less, they become distant, and eventually the relationship just fades. And there's no real conversation about it. Sometimes someone just disappears. One day everything felt normal. Next day, all of a sudden, all communication stops. And now you're left wondering what happened. Or sometimes they don't disappear. They tell you what it is, but actually the explanation doesn't help. They say something vague, like I'm not ready for a relationship or it's not the right time. And those answers don't really give you the clarity that you hoped for. Here's the flip side, and I'm going to keep it real with you. Reason we want closure so badly is because uncertainty is uncomfortable. The unknown, not knowing, okay? Like, I want to know why it didn't work out, because in your mind everything was good. You need to realize that your mind likes to make sense of everything. So when something ends suddenly and it doesn't quite understand it, it feels incomplete, it feels unfinished, and your brain cannot understand this. It feels like a story that stopped halfway through, and nobody wants that. If you want a story, you want it to the end, not halfway. You want the full story. And I know that can be really hard to accept, because you start to think things like, did I do something wrong? Did they lose interest? Was I not enough? Basically, your mind starts to fill in all the blanks. And the more you think about it, the more you start to believe that if you could just get one honest conversation, everything would feel better. Sometimes we're so focused on wanting a closure that we ignore the problem of waiting for a closure, and it's that it can keep you emotionally stuck if you're not careful. Hear me out. When you think about it, you are still waiting for someone to give you something. Maybe an explanation, maybe an apology, maybe just some kind of honesty. The moment you start waiting for these things, a part of you is still holding on. And you might not realize it, but waiting for closure can keep you tied to somebody who has already moved on. And that is a painful place that you want to be in. At some point, I started thinking about closure differently. Closure does not need to come from the other person. Sometimes closure comes from accepting what their behavior had already shown you. Because action often explains more than words ever will. If someone can walk away without an explanation, that says something. If someone chooses not to communicate anymore, that says something. If someone stops showing up for you, that also says something, right? And yes, I know those things can be hard to accept, but at the end of the day, they are still answers. Maybe closure isn't always about trying to understand every little detail. Maybe it's about actually accepting the reality of what had already happened. You may never fully understand why someone changed or why something ended the way it did, but that does not mean you have to stay stuck in that question forever. Sometimes closure is simply telling yourself, this didn't work out the way I had hoped, and allowing that to be enough. I feel a lot of us believe that we need closure to move on because that's become the norm, right? Like whenever a situation ends or a breakup happens, most people end up asking you, oh, what happened? Did you get closure? Did they say like why it ended? And when you don't get a closure, just know that it's okay, because one thing you need to realize is that sometimes freedom comes when you stop waiting for it. When you stop expecting explanation from people who has already shown you where they stand, that is closure in itself. Because sometimes the end of something doesn't always come with answers. It comes with acceptance, and that acceptance can be its own kind of closure. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.